Welcome to our panel discussion on climate resilience. I'm Elisa, co-founder of RePicture, and with me here is Tabitha, who will be moderating our discussion. We're excited to have you join us for our third out of 4 panel discussions for our spring program. On our agenda today, I'll first provide an introduction to RePicture, and then turn it over to Tabitha to introduce our panelists and lead our Q&A. As a reminder to all our students, don't be shy. There will be an opportunity for you to ask your questions in the last 15 or 20 minutes, so be prepared for that. And finally, at 5 o'clock, we'll say goodbye to our panelists and move on into our co-working session. So a quick overview for our guests. When I'm explaining what RePicture is, I always like to start with our why. And what drives us and why we started RePicture is that currently only a tiny slice of humanity is building our future. So STEM fields are this huge force shaping the world all around us, and yet these fields are mostly homogeneous. Additionally, there's projected to be an 85 million person shortage in STEM by 2030. And everyone, all students and professionals alike, need ways to more meaningfully explore careers, guidance with developing their professional skills and networking, and an online presence that can help them connect with the right opportunities for them. So RePicture is building a better STEM resume where you can explore, learn, grow, and connect with the world of STEM, all while building a more holistic resume that says a lot more about you than a bulleted list ever could. So we do this through our platform and our Career Accelerator, which is our flagship award-winning program. In the program, we guide students to grow their professional networks, build those critical professional skills, and with career and self-discovery. And at the center of that and throughout the program, we're also helping them build this really awesome resume and portfolio of work. And what this looks like is students learn about careers by researching and publishing articles about real-world STEM projects that they're interested in. And this showcases their skills, interests, and passions. So for students, it's a way to stand out. And for companies, it's a way to connect with motivated students who are genuinely interested in the work that you do. Our students are also helping to build this new way of exploring careers. So on RePicture, you can see what you might actually do with that biology or engineering degree, see who you might work with and who you might work for, and connect with how that work helps people and society. RePicture is a mission-driven public benefit organization, and our vision is a world where everyone can thrive in STEM. So last, before I turn it over, I just want to highlight for everyone here and those watching later, you can find all of our past panels. You'll be able to find this one as well on our YouTube channel on a wide range of topics. So these panels are really a resource for students, not only in this program, but everywhere today and in the future. So I encourage you to check those out. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tabitha, but not before I spotlight everyone. So let me just add spotlights for all of our guest speakers here. Spotlight, and I will spotlight Tabitha. Great. So welcome to all of our panelists. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Tabitha to introduce them and moderate our discussion today.
Awesome. Thanks, Elisa. So I'm very excited to introduce our first guest panelist, Jane Melia. And Elisa, if you want to skip to the next slide. Awesome. So Jane is the co-founder and CEO of Harvest Thermal, a smart and eco-friendly way to heat your home and water. The Harvest system accumulates electricity at noon when it is cleanest, cheapest, and most efficient. It also uses data like the weather and your routine to optimize energy use, cutting both emissions and costs compared to traditional heating systems. Before starting Harvest, Jane spent 15 years in leadership roles for 5 different startup companies, from cybersecurity to renewable energy manufacturing. Jane has been named one of the 100 Women of Influence in 2022 by Entrepreneur Magazine, and her company has won multiple awards, including the Time Magazine Top GreenTech Companies of 2024 and Fast Company Most Innovative Companies of 2023. Jane holds a PhD in fluid dynamics from the University of Cambridge and a Bachelor of Engineering in Civil Engineering from Imperial College London. All right, our next guest panelist is Heidi Lim. Heidi is the Director of Product and Community Partnerships at 12, a company that transforms carbon dioxide into tangible products. In keeping with their mission to build a fossil-free future, 12 has engineered E-Jet, a sustainable aviation fuel, and CO2-made apparel, tech, furniture, and more. Heidi worked at Delphix, a software company, for several years before deciding to make the jump into the carbon removal field and contribute to solving the climate crisis. Heidi has also served as the COO of LitPick, an education startup that provides free books to readers in exchange for the reviews, promoting literacy and writing. Heidi received their Bachelor in Environmental Engineering from Harvard University. And our final guest panelist is Sean Wahara. Sean is the Vice President of Business Development and Partnerships at Clarity Movement Company, a company that has revolutionized air quality monitoring. Their solar-powered weatherproof sensors include cell connectivity and easy upgrades to monitor several pollutants at once. Sean has many years of experience in the sustainable energy sector, previously working as a program manager at Berkeley Lab and an analyst and program director at Berkeley Energy and Climate Institute. Sean is currently a member of the Environmental Technologies Trade Advisory Committee for the U.S. Department of Commerce, an advisor for the Berkeley Startup Cluster, and an I-Corps mentor for the National Science Foundation. Sean received his bachelor's in political science and government from UCLA. All right, so once again, welcome to all of our panelists. We're so grateful to have you all here with us today. And I think a great question to just start off with is, can you tell us what is your story? How did you get to where you are today? What influenced your direction from anything as early as your childhood up to college? Maybe Jane, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for the introduction. And it's fun to be here today. I'm looking forward to the conversation. So as you said, Tabitha, I'm a civil engineer. I've always enjoyed building things. In fact, I still do enjoy building things when I have a chance. A lot of projects either in process or done in my yard today to testify to that. So love civil engineering, but while doing my degree in civil engineering, I encountered a new domain, which was hydronics and fluid dynamics. I was so passionate about it that I went on to do that PhD, which was a really exciting time in my career, and just loved doing that work. After my PhD, I thought hard and fast about what I wanted to do, and I decided I wanted to continue working in that fluid dynamics field. I became a consulting engineer, worked on some exciting projects such as understanding, how smoke flows in, fires in warehouses, or what happens about the flow of air in atria. What about pollution in tunnels? Also, how can we predict the performance of wind turbines? These were some of the early wind turbine systems going in the late 90s in the UK. How do we plan for them? What about the financial analysis behind that? And that was all really very, very exciting. My career, though, took me from UK to France. And in that move, I transitioned because I wanted to broaden my horizons. So I started working in more of a business role at a large company, HP, where I was taking on roles such as program management, supply chain, operations research, strategic planning and modeling. And that really, over the next 8 years, just taught me so much above and beyond the world of science, which I still was passionate about, but into the more broader world of business and how you actually build things and how you actually deploy them and how you actually make things work. That together, that combination of science and then business, really helped me in the next step, because in 2008, I took the jump from large corporations to the startup world. My career had allowed me to come to the Bay Area, and there was so much happening in terms of startup world in 2008, and I just knew, having had that background in wind turbines, which had already intrigued me, having my background in engineering, I was really excited about what was happening in the clean tech space. And I just knew that if I didn't take that jump from the security and the predictability of the large corporation to the adventure of the startup, I would forever wonder what would have happened if I had done it. So joined a startup company called Sol Focus. It was a concentrated photovoltaic company, very exciting company, built a great product. We ramped that up to 1.5 million units per year. It was also a real learning experience. This was a small company. There was no hiding in a startup. Everybody knows what you do. Everybody knows what your impact is. And everybody also knows what's happening at a company-wide. When I was at HP, even in the biggest role I had, which was a good role I had at HP, strategic planning and modeling, I could impact maybe 1% of the bottom line of that company. At a startup, everybody is responsible for the success of that company. So it's really very exciting. And so having that breadth of knowledge across the different domains really helped me contribute in a strong way to that company, which unfortunately came to an untimely death when the cost of silicon went down and we didn't have a silicon technology, so ours did not go down. So we ended up, one of the exits of startups is to crash, and we crashed. Then worked in an energy storage company called Enervolt. It's a flow battery company, and I headed up, had a slight digression when I was recruited into a quantum tech company called Quintessence Labs, where I headed up business development for a number of years, which was really fun story, very deep physics involved, and that was a lot of fun before coming back and founding my own company, Harvest Thermal. So what I would say is I had the engineering grounding, which was super interesting and really the strong foundation about how I think and how I tackle problems. But that journey through corporate America, through so many different elements, have allowed me to have enough knowledge of certain areas to be dangerous, but enough knowledge to know what is good and what is not good, and which team members are going to really be able to contribute to what we need. And that has been really helpful as we've progressively built Harvest Thermal.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems like all of your experience kind of combined to give you the tools to start your own company, and that's so cool to hear. Heidi, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah. I'm not from the Bay Area. I was raised in Vegas. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, so I'm a West Coast person for sure. I do have some family roots in the Bay. But yeah, I was born and raised there. So I feel like my journey as a climate person has changed so many times. My identity as a STEM person has changed so many times. I was fortunate to go into magnet programs throughout my youth, and so I was in public school, but at math and science focused schools, and that was just it. I don't know if my parents already knew that I liked it or I liked it because I was in those schools, but I've always been really interested in animals and conservation. I wanted to be a vet as a child, which I feel like 90% of children do. And so that was my interest at first as an environmentalist, was let's save the pandas, caring about conservation. And then growing up in Vegas in a place where solar was just starting and was really a hotbed of what was going on with clean energy. I graduated high school in around 2010. So around the time when a lot of those new clean energies were starting to be more of the conversation. So I grew up around that, and I read in a magazine somewhere that if you want to do anything in life, no matter what it be, business, politics, whatever it is, engineering gives you a really firm grounding in that. I wonder if I was reading, I used to read popular science. I wonder if it was popular science that I read, but that quote really stuck with me, and I decided to study environmental engineering and did that during school. My primary interest at that time was to work in clean energy, but I graduated in 2014 when Google, Facebook, Snapchat, those social medias were the hottest thing. They made it sound like you would not want to go anywhere else. You want to be here in Silicon Valley that's where the ping pong tables are. That's where all the snacks are, the sexiest place to work. And I ended up getting sucked into that world. And I met a founder who, at a software company who wanted to hire me as sort of his right-hand person for a young person out of college. That's an amazing opportunity. And I completely left the climate stuff and went there instead and got to experience the sort of the tail end of the, I think, glory days of Silicon Valley, where parties were still happening. COVID, I think, has changed a lot of the culture around software. by the way, I think hardware tech still has that, and I think that is an advantage that hardware technologies have, because you have to go into the office, and I don't like working from home. I think there's something you cannot replace with just being in the break room with your colleagues and making something by hand next to each other. Like, that's just not something a lot of software companies can offer anymore. So yeah, and I was part of that world and got to develop business skills. I was actually during college, I spent a lot of time with women in business and doing like kind of leadership stuff. I wanted to, outside the classroom, learn everything I could about the business side of things, leadership, all those soft skills, and a lot of things that it looks like you're learning here in this program. I actually spent a lot of time in programs like RePicture in high school and college, and they're very helpful. And so I was able to develop those skills outside the classroom while having my kind of hard engineering skills inside the classroom. And that was enough for me to get the internships to get that job out of college, where I was hired as sort of the business side person at a tech company. So then I went to that job. It was software. I was a product manager, so sort of on the business side of the business. And then I would go home every day and read about all the stuff going on in clean tech and, caring about climate change. And eventually that became too much for me to handle and go in day out and be like, I don't really care in my heart about what I'm working on. I'm just like going to this job, but what I really care about needs my help. And so I left that job after a few years, went back into the climate space. And I had maybe like 10 months off. I didn't mean to take 10 months off. I thought it was only a few months, but during that time, I was reading a lot about this thing called carbon removal. Basically, I wanted to work at the place where like my contributions would have the highest impact. And I didn't want to work at a place that felt like, hey, if I'm not in line for that job, someone else would be in line. So Tesla was out. I didn't want to work at Tesla because everyone already wants to work at Tesla. I don't want to work at Google's clean tech practice because everyone already wants to work on that. What's the next thing that people are not paying attention to that's really important? There's this thing now that you may have heard of called direct air capture. That is like one type of technology of what is under the umbrella of carbon management or carbon removal. Humans put up 40 billion tons of CO2 every year into the atmosphere. And since the Industrial Revolution, only 60% of all the CO2 we've ever put up there is like gone, removed from the atmosphere through going into the land or the ocean. And that's because CO2 has a atmospheric lifetime of up to decades, up to like thousands of years. And so a lot of that CO2 persists in the atmosphere. And that's one of the reasons why we have that contributes to a cumulative climate issue. And so we need to draw that CO2 out of the atmosphere. And we need more reasons and more technologies that make that possible. And that's how I ended up at 12, where I am now, because one of the things that we could do to take that CO2 out of the atmosphere or to take it out of difficult flue streams is to make it possible to use the CO2 and do something helpful with it. And so what 12 does is we transform that CO2 into things that are really necessary in a modern world, such as jet fuel, such as like certain plastics, like plastics in your vehicle, in your car, or foam in your running shoe. All those things are made out of carbon. We just happen to only get carbon from oil up to this point, and now we can get it from CO2. So that's how I ended up here. And I'm now currently shifting my focus. My new iteration of me as a climate person is leaning into environmental justice, which is the reason why why climate is particularly interesting and important to me. And so now I'm shifting into community engagement, because I think we, as an industry, need to make sure we're deploying our technologies responsibly. So that's my career climate person trajectory.
Thank you. Yeah, I love hearing about people's stories where they've, made these twists and turns throughout their career. I think it's really inspiring to know that you're not locked into one thing. So yeah, Sean, if you want to finish us off.
Wow. It's just always fun hearing stories too, because it's just like you never know how people get to where they are. So my own climate story, and it was funny because you guys mentioned shy earlier. I'm a huge introvert that became a professional extrovert, working in business development, and never studied a thing in business, never studied a thing in climate going through college. My background in college first was community college, just first and foremost, huge advocate of community colleges at Diablo Valley. I'm pointing over at Pleasant Hill, which is closest to me, and then transferred to UCLA. So I'm really, really happy that BCC students are participating in this program. I would say that my climate trajectory obviously started as a kid. I've always been obsessed with the color green. I'm still like an 8-year-old that I always want to play the green team or the green whatever it is. And it's always about being outdoors. I still go hiking in the regional parks here in the East Bay, probably 3 to 4 times a week. It's just being outside is always critical to me. And then likewise, I've always had a very kind of global, international, we're all on the same team. We're all the same kind of, the nationalization, the competitiveness drove me nuts. And it was something that, believe it or not, was actually playing the original Final Fantasy VII, where it all kind of clicked. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to work on climate impacts. The world needs our help. In terms of family, my grandfather, my father, we're multiple generations here in the East Bay. We're all engineers. So of course I was like, I'm going to do nothing with engineering, nothing with technology. I'm going to study international relations and psychology. Well, that was really interesting because growing up with discometers or weapons development stuff, all the different things that, show up on everyone's kitchen table. As soon as I graduated in 2008 in the middle of the recession, the last recession or 2 recessions ago, whatever it is now, trying to find a job in political science was not the easiest thing in the world. Type in a job thing, 500-mile radius, and there was like 2 jobs requiring 10 years experience. I'm like, crap. So I had to get clever. At that point, had taken some summer courses at UC Berkeley and knew some professors, and quickly realized that professors are really good at science, but not always, much like my dad, really good at explaining what the value was. So quickly got involved in grant writing and synthesizing, it's like a report, except you get paid $100,000 a page or more. So working with these professors, whether it was small modular nuclear reactors, battery chemistries, agricultural technologies, lots of energy work or advanced manufacturing, and started working with professors across the UC Berkeley campus in a variety of very fortunate roles through a lot of funny networking, but became what I called my grad school. So doing this for several years with escalating kind of outcomes and success in this weird kind of coordinating role between UC Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley Lab. At which point we started funding innovation programs as well as education programs. So the Cal Energy Corps, if you guys are familiar with that at Berkeley, or the CleanTech University Prize, which actually 12 was one of the first participants in, back when it was Opus 12, once upon a time. So yeah, it was many wild years and a lot of focus on energy technologies and driving the climate transition through electrification, but recognizing that, as mentioned, policy gaps, equity gaps, economics gaps, all these different pieces of how you make these systems work together. And one of the big pieces that I got fascinated with that brought me to Clarity, which was another one of the companies that came out of all these programs at Berkeley, was air quality. Air quality is like so complex because it's Department of Transportation, it's Department of Energy, it's agriculture, it's public health, all these different sectors, and it's invisible, it's hard to measure. And as we looked at doing economic work tied to rolling out renewables and putting up batteries and next generation energy, going, there's this missing component, particularly in terms of environmental justice and localized public health benefits, that people are throwing the baby out with the bathwater by not counting some of the benefits associated with these transition technologies. So I look at air quality and kind of the work that we're doing today as this like invisible lever to help advance decarbonization, address climate type challenges by adding to the kind of the economics of renewables investments or forest management policy or whatever it happens to be very broadly. But I'll pause there and continue on with these great questions and talk a little more after that. Thanks.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I'm also curious, like, what does your day-to-day look like? Like when you go into the office or, you open up your computer, what does that work look like? So Heidi, if you could start us off.
Oh yeah, I think I didn't say earlier that I started off as the chief of staff, and I did that for a few years, and so that means working directly with the CEO and doing like anything that or an executive, and basically, either way I describe it is like doing whatever they would do if they could double their capacity. What would they be doing? And you take those things off their plate. So and just like general business development. So I'll maybe talk a little bit about that as on like a startup basis. So that is a lot of there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of emails. You know, you open your laptop. I think every job is emails and PowerPoint somehow, sometimes Excel. But yeah, it could be anything from like, hey, we're raising a round and we are talking to investors and we're like pitching investors, or we're pitching clients. Like we are reaching out to some of the biggest brands in the world to work with us. And so there's a lot of those conversations. You know, further down the line, there's like partnership agreements and things like that. So sometimes there's like meetings, internal or external. We care about a lot about culture in our company. And so I was really involved in like creating the brand that you see behind me, working with our brand team. Sometimes it's, you know, internal like culture stuff. How do we like get people, make sure that, you know, 12 is a place that people want to work. And so there's like internal stuff, and then external could be clients, could be investors. And now in my new role where I'm more involved with the community, you know, basically working to speak with stakeholders in the areas that both are around our headquarters and also in our communities that we're deploying our sites at. When we start deploying our technology, we're having conversations with local educators, folks who are working on like, you know, the issues that matter most to those communities. You know, folks who are working on housing equality, you know, housing stability, folks who are like helping people who are, you know, English as a second language looking for jobs. And so yeah, there's a lot of that. And then throughout my time at 12, I've been doing a lot of grant writing. I think my other fellow panelists here probably have spent a fair amount of time doing some grant writing as well. And so that's like kind of a big part of climate technology R&D. But yeah, it could be anywhere in there, you know, startups, there's lots of stuff to do.
Thank you. Sean, what about you?
Oh man, nailed it with the Zoom calls and meetings all day. Yeah, Monday, my record is like 16 Zoom calls in a day. So very often I'm very client facing, obviously manage a lot of stuff internally, which can be a drag on Mondays, but it'll start with the Asian Development Bank. Then I'm talking to Zambia. Then I have a call with Oakland Unified School District. And then you'll turn around and I'll be on a call with City of Chicago or London. Just nonstop, very international work, which is extremely fun and extremely exhausting. That's one thing I always joke. I would tell myself in a younger life is that working in 80 countries and being James Bond sounds really cool until you're dealing with all the time zones. So the pandemic, for all of its challenges, did provide a bit of a break from my carbon footprint and travel. On the flip side, taking 4 a.m. calls and all this different stuff to, you know, meet with governments on their timeframes is not always super fun. But beyond that, it's Zoom calls, email. Thankfully, travel is less. My record was 4 continents in 1 week, which was just terrible and exhausting, even though traveling is fun, but less fun when you're just in hotels and conference rooms. But yeah, just constantly talking, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, that must be a very easy way to become an extrovert from being an introvert. And Jane, how about you?
Right. So, I mean, I think Heidi and Sean have nailed a little bit of the business that we all have. So, my particular role, what I need to do as CEO of this startup is to make sure everybody has what they need to be successful. Right. We've got some really, really good, motivated, smart people on this team. What do each of them need to be able to execute as individuals and as an organization to allow Harvest to have the biggest impact possible? Just as an aside, what we're doing is we're taking 10% of global emissions, which is our home heating and water, and the Harvest system cuts that by 90%, and we save money. So we're really mission driven because we are saving people money. So it's a very equitable solution, and it also has a huge climate impact. So we're all extremely mission driven. So going back to what does that mean in terms of my day-to-day? Well, it's all about making sure that we have the right coordination and the right individual attention and discussion on key decisions and problems. So I kick off Monday morning with a leadership meeting. All the VPs of the company, we meet, we go around, I understand what's going on. Everybody hears what's going on and we discuss and debate. And then throughout the week, I will be meeting with each of them individually to dig into particular problems, budgets, decisions. You know, oh, we didn't pass that test. What do we do? How do we rectify? Oh, these costs are up, or we need to buy more inventory. And really working through all the problems that for which we either need budget or a change in strategy, and we reached an agreement. So it's that building the team and engaging with the team at the right level to help people be successful. Part of being successful is, of course, funding. So a lot of my job is also working with investors, raising funds. That's what CEOs do. And once you finish one round, you breathe for a month and then you start the next round. When I was at a previous startup, I remember the CFO saying he had just raised a significant amount of money, like $100 million. And it was a lot of work. And I remember him saying, yeah, and next month I start again. Well, that is a reality startup, because my job is to feed the beast, right? So that we can scale up, so that we can have more resources. So instead of doing everything sequentially, you can do things in parallel and have all those things. So a lot of time working with investors, which means preparing financials, preparing pitch decks, preparing a lot of material and pitching it and doing that. I also manage the board. I'm the chairperson of our board. So just before this, I had a strategy session with the board members. So we're talking about strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So these are my investors and board members. And then there are roles that I have which are really to support sales and marketing. That means speaking to media, going to conferences, going to trade shows. We're all aligned on, we actually just developed, we spent a lot of work, Heidi, this year working on our brand as well. So trying to make sure that we are coherent and consistent in a brand, and that the brand has an impact, because before that we were all over the place. So a lot of that, going to speaking events. We've got a big Earth Day event coming up in like next month, which we're super excited about. And, my job is to really support that. So, and yeah, it seems to be from one call to the next to another meeting, but it's actually really exciting as well. The diversity of what I do is exciting, and the impact of what everybody's doing is really very rewarding. One thing in a startup, and I don't know if Sean and Heidi, if you see this, is you feel that you've got your nose to the grindstones, work. And then every now and then you look back and you see, wow, look how high we've climbed. And so you've always got another mountain ahead of you. But when you look back over your shoulder, it's amazing what smart individuals working together on a passion project can really achieve.
This is actually something that has come up in our conversations. Like, we'll have an all hands and like say, oh, we got this really big grant or this thing, but now we'll resume. People feel weird to like celebrate it or like unmute and cheer. And so we try to make it like, there are always those people who will start it, because you have to celebrate it. Like, people will burn out if you don't see that their work is actually getting somewhere. So yeah, I definitely feel that.
Absolutely. That's one of the things. I met our CEO when he was 19 years old. And it was 10 years ago that we started the company. We had 0 sensors deployed in the world and started with a $10,000 seed grant, literally just in a basement building at UC Berkeley. Today, with deployments with governments in 80 countries. And, once upon a time, we're like, oh, these sensors, whatever. And everyone's like, who are you? What are you doing? Your kids? And now it's like, well, where are you guys working? We're like, London, Chicago, New York. And it's like, wow, you have to look back and really appreciate. And it's been blood, sweat, and tears for a decade, like truly blood, sweat, and tears. The startup business is not for the faint of heart. But when you think about going from like, we didn't know how to price when I first came into the company, they're like, oh, Sean, just go sell these to cities. And they're like, what's an RFP? And I'm like, an RFP is how governments buy things. Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And then you turn around and it's like 10 years later, you look at where you're getting, there's still progress to go, but you have to remind yourself of the success you've come through.
Yeah, you can focus too much on the climb, which is, you have to, but it is hard and you do get burnt out. So yeah, celebrating is difficult as well. A lot of us are remote. But in October, we were able to have a big team get together. We had people coming from all over the place, and we're still a small team, right? We're not huge yet, but we do have people in Florida and Connecticut and Minnesota, and we all came together. And we had a few days in Berkeley, and it was part work, but part also just doing fun stuff like mural woods and so on. It was great.
Yeah, thank you all for your answers. Yeah, I definitely think that not enough people look back and really celebrate the things that they've done. And, as a company, I'm sure it's even more important to make sure that everybody still, appreciates and celebrates. So, yeah, another question that I have for you is, of all the projects that you've worked on, what's been your favorite and why? So either, at the company that you're working on now, or maybe something that you've done in the past. Yeah, Sean, if you could start us off.
Absolutely. So personally, of my two favorite projects, separate from what I'm doing at Clarity now, which would be like choosing my favorite children, because there's just so many amazing communities that I get to work with. It's like the coolest thing ever. But of the two projects that I really loved, we had one called when this was one back when there was in this short-lived institute called Becky, the Berkeley Energy Climate Institute, where Jennifer Granholm, our current Secretary of Energy, was working at Berkeley. It was like the coolest experience ever. Ran two innovator programs, one called the Berkeley CleanTech University Prize, which was a 3-year DOE grant to basically help create clean tech startups and funds for UC Berkeley, and one called it was the Becky Energy Challenge, effectively, which actually funded Clarity, Watt Time, a number of these other companies. And here I am almost 10 years later, and the number of these companies that are still alive and well and proceeding, these were small little efforts that we got to like push and just help, barely a footnote, but seeing this like tremendous cohort of companies go forth into the world, Opus 12, obviously, now 12, all these companies that, have gone on to have this scaling impact on climate and sit there and go like, wow, it was probably one of the most impactful things I've ever been able to do. It was such a fortunate, thankful opportunity.
Awesome. Jane, what about you?
Okay, so, for the longest time, I was always thinking, well, this is great what I'm doing, but what would it be like if I founded my own? And I had this kind of whiteboard tally of ideas, and most of them really were not very good at all. But I kept trying, and every now and then I'd write up a business case, and I thought, yeah, this is really not going to fly, and it was never the right time anyway. With this particular one, I mean, the genesis behind Harvest is that I'm sitting in an old Berkeley house with had a really, really old gas furnace that was about to die. And I knew I couldn't replace it with a gas furnace because we're talking about 10% of climate emissions are due to heating and hot water in our homes. So, you've got to fix that. So I won't go into all the details of it, but we built a system in my home before founding the company, and it cut our bills by 42%, and it cut our emissions by 90%. And I'm thinking, okay, this is the one. If I do not found this company, I will forever wonder what happened. And so, although this is, blood, sweat, and tears, right, Sean, you said it right. This is brutally hard at times. It's extraordinarily hard work. It's also the most exciting and rewarding thing I've ever done. The other startups were fun as well, but this is really, for me, it all comes together in the journey that we're in right now. And yeah, I wouldn't miss it for anything.
Yeah, solving a problem that you experience on your own is just such a good way to, go about that. So I'm glad that you're able to create this product that, benefits you, but also so many other people. And Heidi, what about you?
I'll talk about an early project, an early win from, I've been at 12 for just over 5 years. So I'm not a founder, obviously. I came in later, and but I was at like number 18. We were still Opus 12 at that time, and we're about like 300 now. So it was a very exciting time when we could make those first milestones happen. I'm thinking of the first time we ever made a material. It was polycarbonate, which is like it's a certain type of plastic that's like in your sunglasses or glasses. If you're wearing glasses right now, like 60% of the lenses in America are like polycarbonate lenses. So we actually were asked to make a pair of sunglasses for Rob Swan, who is an adventurer, the first person to go to both North and South poles. And he was making an expedition down to the South Pole and he had gotten in contact with us, and he was like, could you just make me something cool? He was like, can you just make me something like a cup or like glasses or whatever? And we ended up making him sunglasses. And it was the first time that we figured out how to like do all the steps to make that material out of carbon dioxide. And that was just so cool to hold, because that's what we can take for, hopefully one day we scale it out and meet those, billions of tons of CO2 when you get to that scale.
Yeah, that must have just been so incredibly rewarding. And yeah, so for our next question, a lot of these students are either in high school or in college, so they're going to be, within the next few years looking at finding a job. So do you have any advice for those students as far as, like, how did you learn about and land either your current job or jobs that you've had in the past? So Jane, if you could start us off.
Right. So when I was finishing my graduate degree, I actually stressed a lot about what am I going to do. Even before that, I stressed a lot about which degree should I do and so on and so forth. I overthought it really, really a lot. I mean, it is an important decision. You certainly need to give it thought. And I did, personality test, trying to figure out where would be my best fit. But, if you recall the circuitous route I took to get here, I think ultimately, your personality is going to take you in the direction where you need to go. And very rarely will you embed on one career and be obliged to stay in that for the rest of your life. And in pretty much every job, there's an opportunity to learn and there's an opportunity to excel. So I would just say, do your best to pick the right job, of course, or the right career. But then when you get in it, just embrace it, do it really well. And then you'll be able to stay in it or move on. And if you move on, you will be moving on with that reputation of excellence and good references and a good network. And you'll be able to steer the course because you're going to change and you're going to figure out what you want to do later on. But just so pick something, do it really well, and then you'll be able to do whatever you want.
Thank you. Heidi.
I think this group is general STEM, so I'm gonna say work and climate. Like this is the like a pivotal time in humankind that you have the opportunity to actually work on the one of the most existential problems to humanity, and it is it's actually also like a lot of money is going into this space. Like a lot of venture capitalists and investors are now looking um, at the climate space, and so it's also a very exciting time to be part of it. And I feel like you won't regret it. There's a lot of places to look for jobs if you are interested. One that I always recommend is called Climate Base. I'll put it in the chat, and you can like search for your major, and like there's software engineering roles, there's hardware engineering, chemistry, biology, all sorts of things. And I'm not just talking about climate tech. There's also like regenerative agriculture. There's like a lot of things about like mangrove restoration. There's just so many ways that we need to work on climate change, and we absolutely would love that energy from all of you.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible resource. I'm sure the students would love to have that. And Sean.
I'm so glad you asked this question. So when I graduated back in the last recession, it was 86 applications and I didn't get a single response. And I was like, wow, this is fun. So one of the things I always tell people, I love mentoring and helping people find jobs, particularly in the climate space, is you can hit the ones outside of the strike zone. You don't have to wait for a job posting. Not a single job I have gotten in the last embarrassing number of years, if I count. Not embarrassing, just they go by quickly. Let's put it that way. Has all been through networking connections. So again, as an introvert, it's meeting people, it's understanding what value people need in an organization. It's making a compelling argument for yourself and why you're of value to an organization. They may not have a position for you today, but they might know someone that has a position for you tomorrow. So really investing in people, not being afraid to, if you think of the job world, do I want to be trying to get through the same door with 200 applicants, or do I want to meet someone that can help me find a different door or a different path? Can I demonstrate my own entrepreneurialism by coming up and creating and positioning myself as a value to a company in an interesting way? Can I volunteer some of my time to get an opportunity to do this with an organization? This was something that, literally was how I got my traction, and then you prove it and you go. So yeah, again, don't be afraid to swing outside the strike zone. You can still hit those, baseball analogy, sorry. But yeah, it's just something that just keep trying and think creatively. It's not just a question of, trying to hammer and nail everything you can on a jobs board, and, figure out what you're passionate about. So.
Yeah, I absolutely second that. I actually found out about RePicture through a friend. So, I can't underscore the importance of networking as well. So we have some time left, and I think now it would be a great time to open it up to the students if they have any questions. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question to any or all of our panelists. You could also put one in the chat, but I definitely encourage you to unmute. Oh, and I think we have one in the chat here from Sabrina. So she says, with so much time spent fundraising and networking, how do you personally stay on top of your game to lead in your respective roles?
I work a lot is one thing. I do work a lot. Although I do also reserve time to work out and do other things, not as much as I would like, but it's actually really important. In fact, straight after this, I'm going to the gym. But I do work a lot. I mean, there's no question that leadership in a startup, you're working a lot of hours. But I do also have a good team. And one thing that I'm learning to do better is just delegating and not having to, because the problem is you start from zero. So at zero, I have to do absolutely everything. And so you get used to having to do everything. And then after a while, you have to wean yourself off. It's like kids growing up. You have to say, okay, now those decisions, as long as it fits within this budget, I don't care about it. Just do it because I know you're going to do a good job. So delegation is something that I'm getting better at, but it's still a lagging indicator, which means I'm still working too much. I think there will probably be a threshold, hopefully, when we get a little bit bigger, more people, where we'll be able to have maybe a bit more balance, work-life balance. But right now it's all hands on deck and working very hard.
Sean or Heidi, do you have anything to add?
It's not part of my job anymore, so I don't think I'm the person to ask.
Yeah, I think thankfully the delegation, I used to be a lot more involved in fundraising, and now I've completely punted that to the CEO as he's kind of gotten more and more experience with engaging with investors. Jane nailed it with the delegation piece. I mean, I'm not good at managing people. It's like not something and I've had to grow into that skill set very much, and learning to delegate is critical. One of the things I'm constantly telling people is doing more with less is not a scalable strategy. Efficiency is great, don't get me wrong, but there comes a point where you have to hire and invest in people, and you have to trust them, and building the right culture and building the right tools and training. It's something that it's a step away from revenue and all these other billion different goals that we're chasing as a startup, but it's so critical at knowing those right times to do that, so that you can maintain your sanity. Climate depression is a total thing, as is startup depression. So definitely something to find and ensure that work-life balance, so that we can all sustain our sustainable efforts.
All right, it looks like we have another question from Ari. So Ari, feel free to unmute.
Hi, I really like how you talked about investing in people. But I'm a high school senior right now, and I'm trying to see which path I can take to have like the best impact. And so far, I've gotten accepted into a school for biosystems engineering, and then a different school for environmental engineering. And I'm wondering like which one would like set me on a path, or if you have any guidance for like what would like just any guidance on choosing between the two.
I think a lot of people end up changing their majors during school, and also they end up like, you'll find, I think among us, even in a way, like you'll find that people will work on jobs that may not be necessarily like exactly a fit to their major. So I would pay more attention to what the school is like. Is it a school that you will get opportunities and you'll get attention and they have really good professors? Are you going to get to develop personally at that school? Like that's what I would pay attention to more than the exact major, because they're both, it sounds very similar. I mean, they're engineering, and also is their engineering program good? So that's what I would focus on.
All right, great. Thank you so much for your question, Ari. If anybody else has a question, I'll give it another like 30 seconds or so.
Don't be shy, everyone.
By the way, I since while you think about your question, I want to posit that I really admire, Jane, you for like being a founder. Like I know I cannot be a tech founder. Like I don't want to be a tech founder because I know there's so much to it. And since we're talking about like work-life balance and all that, I do want to mention also like it's okay if you're like, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur within a company. Like founding is not for me, but this is the kind of another type of role where maybe you are supporting, and that's also okay. I think there's too much emphasis on founding in today's culture, and it is absolutely admirable, but also there's really often ways to contribute. And yeah, I think just listen to yourself about like what kinds of role you want and what kind of lifestyle is right for you as well. And you can also choose a company based on culture, like, and you absolutely should ask questions like, hey, do people actually work? Do they work on the weekends? Are they on call all the time? Because you don't want to burn out. And there are startups that have cultures that are like that, and they can be dangerous if those are, not things that you want.
And also you can do different things at different times, right? So right now I am I'm all hands on deck and working extremely hard because this is the role I've chosen. So it's hard work, but it's actually something that I've chosen and aspired to. But I've also done other things. I was a stay-at-home mom for a few years. I worked part-time for a few years. I've worked as an engineer, and so the work-life balance can fluctuate, and you've got to make sure it fits where you want to be at that time in your life. And you don't have to do it, of course. So, and I think at this constant level, is good for a few years. I don't think anybody should do that for 20 years. I think that's not good, not healthy.
Yeah, those are great pieces of advice. Caden, if you want to ask your question, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just to introduce myself real quick, I'm Caden, a sophomore majoring in chemical engineering at Berkeley. And I just had a question for pretty much like all of the panelists, because it's kind of something I was thinking about. But what are like the upcoming problems each one of your companies are facing in like pursuit of sustainable energy? Because I think in things like storage, integration, etc.
I didn't quite get the end of the question. So about storage integration, sorry.
Oh yeah, just like what like problems does your like sustainable energy or like climate company face? And I was thinking of like those are the things I hear about more often, like storage and the integration of said energies.
Yeah, okay. I can take first shot, and Sean and Heidi, feel free to jump in. So for us, it really is about market transformation. So it's how you take a product which is innovative, which can have an impact, and which is, you can solve a technical problem. That doesn't mean that you're going to have an impact, because you've got to bring it to market. It has to be something that people are aware of, understand, are willing to take a risk on a company which doesn't have a big brand, and that people are willing to install it, and it's going to be financeable. So it's actually a lot of the softer areas which are harder to crack. The technical one, you have a spec, you build it, you engineer it, you use smart engineers, you could typically solve it. There may be some issues, but you can solve it. Cracking the commercialization, for me, is the next mountain I'm climbing.
Heidi?
Anything else, Sean, Heidi?
So for myself, it's regulations and standards. So primarily we deploy air monitoring technologies of governments. So whether that's the US EPA or state agencies and cities. So like, for instance, the problem from environmental justice perspective, San Francisco has a single measurement point for air quality for the entire city. Literally one measurement point officially. Now there's purple airs out there. We're kind of like a sub-regulatory purple air as well, but more positioned for government. But trying to get the US EPA to develop new regulations such that these have meaningful impacts and how you can use them as policies, we're very beholden to the politics of the world and country, et cetera. So if the US EPA shifts or doesn't exist in a few years, or whatever it happens to be, these terrifying kind of considerations, it makes it really challenging to use this kind of data to make a change. And you're always fighting culture and behavior too. There's trade-offs with this stuff. Like an oil and gas transition does put people out of work. It takes winners today economically to losers tomorrow. So they talked about just transitions, et cetera, that like even in air quality, if I say air quality is good for everyone, yes, but who's going to pay for newer, cleaner cars? Who's going to pay to retrofit your gas stove to an electric one? So there's a lot of social and socioeconomic discussions to be had around the transition and adoption of these kinds of technologies as well, whether it's air quality or energy, you name it. And those are long conversations, unfortunately.
I'm just going to +1 to both. Commercialization is tough, and also there needs to be the right environment around it to make that happen, whether it be market or policy levers. Like, we all here benefit from policymaking, by the way. Like, government is extremely important, especially when it comes to like big shifts, like moving into from a oil-based economy to a hopefully more climate-friendly economy. So anyway, it's very interesting to think holistically about these problems, but it's not as simple as, hey, there's one technology problem, although there are definitely technology challenges. And of course, that's part of the research development part.
All right, awesome. So we are just at 8 o'clock. One question that we like to end on, and just quick, like under a minute answer. If you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, or give a piece of advice to these students, what would you say? And how about we start off with Jane?
Seize opportunities as they arise. The opportunity you don't take, you'll keep wondering about it for years and years and years and years and years. So give it a try. It doesn't matter if you fail, just give it a try.
All right, Sean?
I have two favorite quotes. One is always, success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. The climate thing is never going to be easy, but you just keep going. I believe it's attributed to Winston Churchill. And the other is very similar. I think it's a Disney quote, but if you can dream it, you can do it. Just keep trying. It's like, I was a blue collar kid that never wore a dress shirt in my life. My family never wore a dress shirt. And it's like, never could have imagined this life or having this kind of impact in the climate world and the amazing opportunities. But it's like, it's the tenacity and again, swinging outside that strike zone.
I'd say listen to yourself. There's so many ways to get pulled and pushed by other people's expectations or like peer pressure. And there were so many times when I almost went a different direction that now like people who were going in that direction are now asking me how to come in the direction I am. And that's very gratifying to hear. So yeah, if climate change is interesting to you, like, and your peers aren't doing it, just do it. Cause that's what, listen to yourself.
All right. Well, thank you all again so much for taking time out of your day to speak with us and, impart your wisdom on the students. So I'll turn it over to Elisa to give a final wrap up and goodbye.
Yes, thank you, Tabitha, and thank you everyone again for joining us today. I know we're a couple more minutes over, so I'll try to be really quick, but I just want to do a quick wrap up. First of all, I didn't know I was going to get so much inspiration on the startup front, so thank you all for that. Also, I wanted to highlight a couple of things that everyone said. Heidi talked about you can't replace being in person, and I want to second that and really emphasize that, especially coming out of the pandemic. I know a lot of students have had a harder time getting those in-person experiences, and they're just so valuable, or have been reluctant to take them, and they're just so valuable. Like, go be in person, like make those connections human to human early on in your career. Some of those connections you make in your early career are those ones that stay forever, and that are your strongest network. And she also mentioned focus on the school, and I think later mentioned and it carries over to focus on the culture, focus on the place you're going, the culture of the place, the community that you're going to be joining versus the thing that you will be doing is almost like as important or maybe even more important. Jane highlighted, really did a beautiful job of highlighting the differences between being in a startup versus a larger company, and that's a choice that you can make. And there's, different things about each of those, right? And one or the other may be right for you. So I think a lot of students think of the biggest names companies and they want to go there, but that's not necessarily the right place for you, or at the stage in your career, right? And that your personality is going to take you in the direction that you need to go. I just love that so much. And then Sean, like you highlighted something that we say over and over and over again in our program, which is that engineers and scientists, you know, they tend to be really good at the science, but not always good at explaining. So the effort that you put into being able to communicate your ideas and what we're doing in this program, that is key. If you can be that engineer that can explain what you're gonna do, what you're doing, you're gonna stand out. We have a lot of engineers in our program, so I want to highlight that. And then also the networking piece, like just that, you know, jobs, careers happen through networking. You're gonna find your jobs, you're gonna find your tribe, your people through networking. So, you know, we're a little over, sorry about that, but you all had so many amazing, wise things to say. So I wanted to highlight all those, and thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate your time. I think one of the answers really showcased why we should all be very lucky, why we're all very lucky and should be very grateful for the time that you spent with us today. So thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon, hopefully.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Great
you
to see
all.
everybody. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.